Hey guys, welcome back to Greg's Fishroom. And in today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into my 5-gallon carboy baby brine shrimp hatcheries. Now, I've got 3 of them set up behind me. We're going to take a close look at one of them. We're going to walk through all of the steps I did to construct it. We're also going to walk through all of the steps that I go through every single day to hatch live baby brine shrimp down here in my fish room for my fish. I firmly believe that everyone that has fish that are capable of eating baby brine shrimp should probably be feeding baby brine shrimp. So much so that if you are only feeding 2 foods to your fish, maybe like a flake food and then something else, that something else should probably be baby brine shrimp. It is that good of a food for conditioning your fish for breeding and also for baby fish once they're hatched. All right guys, so let's jump into this build behind me, see exactly how I put it together, how I use it, and all of the products that you might need to build one yourself. So come along with me and learn how to be a better aquarist. Alright guys, so here is the 5-gallon baby brine shrimp hatchery. As you can see, we have 3 of them going here, and essentially what I do is I make sure that I'm always harvesting from one and setting one back up, and then one is sort of in the middle. So usually it goes 48 hours old, 24 hours old, and then 0 hours old. And that allows you to make sure that you always have baby brine shrimp hatching at any given point within the day so that you can feed your fish whenever you need to. So how exactly did I put this together, and why did I select some of the materials that I did? Well, let's walk through this. Let's start with the stand. So we have a very simple construction for a stand here. We just have some cinder blocks, 2 of them. You can see there, stacked on top of each other, and then we have a 2x6 base. And the reason I went with 2x6 is it's got a little bit more surface area than a 2x4, and I just thought it would work out better. This isn't a very long span. This is only about 4 feet, so the 2x6 is going to do just fine holding this amount of liquid, no problem. And you can see I put a couple of 2x3s as sort of braces to make sure that these boards don't shift back or forth. So this is a solid platform. We've got 2 of those drilled on the bottom there to make this platform itself. Up above, I have a like a PVC frame, and this just allows me to have all of my electrical up top, and we can talk through that in a bit. So let's talk about the hatchery itself here and the components that went into this build. So first off, on the outside, what we have is just a regular white 5-gallon bucket. And I selected white because it allows you to see all the way through, so that you can judge the color of the mix. And basically, something like an orange bucket, you might misinterpret the color of the water, and so it might not give you as accurate of a representation. It'd be harder to understand where the brine shrimp are and if they've all hatched yet or not. So what I did with this 5-gallon bucket was essentially I took a Dremel tool and I just cut out a big window out of the front of this 5-gallon bucket, and that forms the base for this hatchery. The only other thing I did was, if you can see down on the bottom, I drilled a hole in the bottom, and that hole is essentially the right size to allow this 5-gallon water jug to fit down in there. So this is the other reason to have the 2x6 board spaced out a bit, so that that hole can be right in the middle to allow the jug to sort of sit a little bit below the boards. So once that hole's drilled out, your 5-gallon bucket frame is basically good to go. The only other thing I did was I put a oh, what are they called? It's like the bendy sort of cinch straps. It's like a metal wire, and then it's just like coated wire, and so you can sort of twist those, tighten them up. You can see I've got it tightened up on the side, and I just use this. This is like an extra large size. I just use this to help secure the bottle in place so that the bottle doesn't fall out of the 5-gallon bucket. Okay, the only other thing I have here down here on the bottom is foam backer rod, and I installed this in the bottom, and I just sort of coiled it up. It's not glued in place or anything. I just coiled it up to give a nice soft cushion for my carboy that we're going to put on top here. And as you can see through use, it has sort of flattened out a little bit, but that's okay. That's what it's meant to do. So it's more compressed in the middle, less compressed on the edges, and that allows that carboy shape to just sort of like form inside here to give it what it needs to make sure it's not under stress. All right, let's talk about the carboy itself. So this is essentially just a standard 5-gallon water jug. You can literally go and pick up a used 5-gallon water jug and use that, and that works great. I went ahead and I ordered these ones specifically because they were clear in color. Most of the 5-gallon water jugs for like water bubblers, they're blue or gray or some other color that's not exactly clear. And again, it was really important to me that I could see through it very clearly so that I could identify the color of the shrimp and if they fully hatched yet or not. So highly recommend going with the clear container. The link to that will be in the description down below. So this technically is a plastic 5-gallon carboy that people use mostly for brewing beer. And so they are available online. They do cost a little bit more than just a 5-gallon water jug that you might be reusing. So spend the money if you want. I think it's worth it to make sure that you have something that's clear. Okay, and on the other end, I've just installed a regular plastic cap. These are the ones that you would tear off, and then you'd attach this to your water bubbler. But this stays on. This is permanent. Once you put that on, you don't take it off. In this case. So, and that's worked really well. It has not leaked at all. So super happy with that. All right, and then the final thing here to prepare this was cutting a hole in what is the bottom of this carboy, which after flipped upside down, it's now the top. And again, I use my Dremel tool to cut this out. It's a little rough. You can see there are some spots here where there's some extra sort of heated plastic that sort of melted back in place. But that's okay. I could clean this up with a razor knife if I wanted, but I have not done that with these hatcheries, and they work out just fine. All right, and then a couple of final things here is I was able to find these plastic plant drip trays that fit just super nicely here in the top here. You can see it's like a pretty snug fit, and I just made sure that I cut that opening in the jug to essentially fit with these as well. So this just allows me to put something up top, which allows me to seal this so that the salt creep is not escaping from this jug, to make sure that any of the brine shrimp eggs or shells or anything like that, all of it's contained within this jug itself. And then the final thing I have here is just another saucer from a plant. This one's terracotta, so it's got a little bit of weight behind it. And the words don't really matter on these. I wrote them out, and I found out it doesn't really matter. But the important thing here is that there's a little bit of weight to hold this down in place. But also, you have a 2-color system. So I went with yellow and blue. And essentially, how I use this is the jug that's ready to be harvested, that's 48 hours old, and that has fully hatched, should be flipped to the yellow side. And then the next one, this is the 24-hour jug, that's blue. And then this one over here that I'm about to reset and fill back up with you guys, that will also be blue. So it just gives you another visual indicator along with the the color of the eggs in the mix to know exactly which jug you should be harvesting from, and then which one is up next. And you can just flip those from yellow to blue as you harvest these on a daily basis. It is pretty obvious that this one is darker, more of a golden color, and this one is still a little bit more brown in color. But as your eggs get older, or as you have more hatch, it could be a scenario where you might get mixed up. So it's just a nice visual cue to make sure you know where you're supposed to be harvesting. All right, let's put this on top. Let's reassemble this, and then we can talk through the lighting, and we can talk through the air. Okay, lighting. All we have here is just a little LED light. This is one of those gooseneck lights with a clamp, and I've plugged that into this power strip bar up here, and all of my power strips and power sources here have their own little toggle switch. And I found this is super handy. So if I want to turn my light on or off, or if I had a heater in one of these and wanted to turn it on or off, or if I had an individual air pump for any one of these, I could turn it on or off really easily. But I've stripped this down so that all I'm worried about right now is just the lights. So as you can see, the light is on. I could flip that toggle off, on, off. Super easy, pretty self-explanatory, but having that toggle switch available makes life quite a bit easier, so you're not fumbling for things or plugging things in and then unplugging them on a daily basis. That can get really old pretty quickly. All right, and then my air, I just have my air loop way up above here. So I've got my linear piston air pump, I've got my PVC air loop, and I'm running my airline down here, and this right here is the key to a lot of success. I've done brine shrimp hatcheries in the past where you transition from airline tubing to rigid airline tubing, and it's not wide enough, and what happens is the salt will build up and it will actually clog the bottom of your rigid airline tubing. So what I've done here is I took a quick connect and I went from the standard airline tubing size to one size larger, and I think this is a 3/8 inch or something like that, and then this is like a rigid tubing here. So what I'm able to do then is I can put this into the bottom of my mix, and I can put it into the neck there of the bottle way down below. And then I've got a little notch cut out here for that, so I can lock that in place, and then that's good to go. And I found that that size for tubing will not clog up. Even if you have a pile of salt on top of it, that's still dissolving, it won't clog up. So it makes life a whole lot easier. The bubbles come out quite a bit bigger as well, and that's a good thing because you don't want small, tiny bubbles. It'll interfere with the brine shrimp and make them float. So that's the setup there. All of the pieces, all of the components that go into it. In terms of how I go about adding water and other ingredients to this mix, let's talk through that next. All right, we are filling our 5-gallon hatchery now. You can see I have the Python hook here coming from my sink, which makes it really easy to fill this thing back up. And I find that's really easy to use. To just drape inside there. It's not going to go anywhere, and just makes things easy. All right, next thing I'm going to do is just do a little bit of prime. I don't really measure. The brine shrimp don't seem to care a whole lot. I just want to make sure that the chloramine is out of the water. All right, as this is filling, the next thing I want to do is use some baking soda. I use about 1 tablespoon of baking soda for my 5-gallon jug here. And that just helps to make sure that the pH remains stable. As those eggs start to hatch, there's the eggs themselves, there's the shells, there's the nutrients that come into the water and everything like that. And it can mess with your water chemistry. So depending on your water, if your water is harder or softer coming out of the tap, baking soda may or may not be necessary. but the longer your brine shrimp sit in their hatching jar, the more it helps to have that, just to make sure that you have a stable environment for those. You don't want your pH crashing while you're trying to harvest or hatch those shrimp, because then you're just going to have a weak hatch, or the eggs might not hatch, or the brine shrimp might die as soon as they hatch. All right, the final thing I have to do here is add my salt. And this is the part where, I just use the cheapest thing that's available, honestly. Brine shrimp are not picky. And so I use the Morton pool salt. It comes in a 40-pound bag, and it's like $5 or $6 or something like that. So it lasts quite a while. I put 2 full cups of that in this mix, and I don't go all the way to the 5 gallons. I stop right around this line here. It makes it easy to get a repeatable result when I go all the way up to the black line here. So that's almost full. We're going to turn our air on, start bubbling that. I'm going to turn off the water. All right, the water's turned off. We've got this bubbling. Sometimes it helps to stick that down in the very bottom so that it can help to dissolve the salt a little bit better. But I'm gonna jump straight into adding my brine shrimp eggs. So let me go grab those. All right, so I got my brine shrimp eggs here. The eggs that I use, since I'm hatching so many brine shrimp here, is the cheapest ones that I could find online. And that happens to be the Brine Shrimp Direct. This is the technical grade of brine shrimp eggs, and so this is a lower hatch rate than most people would probably want to deal with. It's only 82% hatch, which is pretty low. I think 90% hatch is the one that most people aim for. But as you can see, I'm doing 2 full tablespoons of brine shrimp eggs, and I could probably double that if I wanted to in this size container and get away with it. So that's a lot of eggs, and so as you can imagine, I go through this pretty quickly. And honestly, since I have such a high volume of water here, if some of the eggs don't hatch, it doesn't really matter because I'm hatching so many of them. So I go for the one that is essentially the cheapest per ounce, and that happens to be the technical grade. I buy in a 4-pack. But if you're just starting out, if you have one small hatchery, if you're not hatching a lot of brine shrimp, it's fine if you find a 90% hatch rate eggs and pay a little bit more. It's certainly worth it because you're getting a cleaner hatch, and then you're not polluting your water quite as much. But it's not as much of an issue for me. All right, guys, so that is our 5-gallon brine shrimp hatchery set up and operational. You can see I've got a good rolling boil of big bubbles in here, and that's going to keep all of this circulating. You noticed I used cold water. The salt hasn't fully dissolved yet. It's still on the bottom of this container. And I put my eggs straight in. And I haven't found any difference between waiting a day or pre-mixing my salt into my water or anything like that. The brine shrimp will hatch. You give them light, you give them water, and you make sure it's got a little bit of salt in it, they will hatch. And so within 24 hours, this will then look like this, and after another 24 hours, it'll look like this, and it will be ready for harvest. So now that we've set this up and it's going, let's talk through how we harvest this once it's 48 hours old. All right, this is the secret to all of my success when it comes to harvesting. This is a little DIY tool I put together, and you'll notice it uses the same plastic drip pan, and so that fits nicely on the top of my 5-gallon hatcher. And through that, I put a bulkhead with a piece of PVC, which is cut specifically just long enough so when this sits inside, it goes almost all the way to the bottom, and it's centered in the middle. So it's sucking out all of the brine shrimp as they settle towards the bottom. And so from there you can see we just have an elbow, and then we've got another elbow, and then that transitions to our siphon tube. So let's get this set up and let's siphon out 5 gallons of brine shrimp. Okay, we're ready to hatch here. So what we're going to do is take the lid off here of the container. We're going to shut our air off completely. Take that air line out. And then we're going to take this siphon tool and we're going to stick that right down in so that it sits nicely in the top of that container. I'm going to take my saucer and just throw it on there to make sure it's got a little bit of weight and it stays in the correct position. So now you can see we've still got some turbulence in the water. We have to wait maybe 2 to 3 minutes for this water to settle down. And what you'll see is all of the hatched eggshells, they're very lightweight because the baby brine shrimp have hatched out. So all of those hatched shells will rise all the way to the top, and then all of the unhatched eggs, they're still very heavy, they have sunk all the way down to the bottom. And you remember that neck of the bottle, all of those unhatched eggs will go all the way down into the bottom of that neck, and the PVC pipe that we just inserted is not long enough to siphon those out, so we're safe. And so what we want to see here is we want to see a clear separation within the water here of the hatched eggs, eggshells up at the top. We want to see the unhatched eggs all the way down in the bottom. And then in the middle, we want to see sort of the top half be more of a clear liquid water, and the bottom half, we want to see that orange gold color of the brine shrimp. And once that's happened, we'll know it's ready to start this siphon. So let's give this a couple minutes, we'll come back and we'll start the siphon. Alright, welcome back. It's been a couple minutes, and you can start to see the top of this becoming a little bit more clear and the bottom becoming a little bit more orange. So that's great. And I also noticed that the top is covered with our empty hatched eggshells. So that's great. The one thing we're going to add here to the bottom of this tubing is just a siphon bulb. This is used to siphon gas like out of a car. And so that just attaches here loosely to the end of our tubing, and that allows us to just pump this bulb a couple times, start the siphon so we're not getting nasty brine shrimp water in our mouth, and then we're going to dispense that water into a brine shrimp net so that we capture all the shrimp. So once we see that water coming, we can just take that bulb off, and then we've got our shrimp. And you can see we're getting a very clean hatch here. So I don't see any shells really whatsoever. And what you're aiming for is that nice golden orange color. And that's all live baby brine shrimp. 2 tablespoons full have hatched now. So that's great. And you may notice that if this brine shrimp net starts to get a little backed up because it's getting clogged or it's getting full of brine shrimp and we're going too fast, we're siphoning too fast, we can always lift this up, and then that water flow slows down because there's less of a difference between the head height of that water in the 5-gallon jug and where our tube is coming out. But if we want to make it go faster, siphon faster, we just put it down even further. So that's a really good way to regulate the flow of the water that you're siphoning, is just to move it up and down and find the right spot for the amount of flow you need. So we're going to siphon this down, not all the way to the bottom, but almost all the way to the bottom. We'll give this a couple minutes. we are reaching the end of our hatching jar here with the siphon, and so we've probably captured at least 90% of the brine shrimp that are in this jar. And to prevent ourselves from catching too many of the eggshells, we're going to stop at this point and just allow the rest of the siphon to just siphon out into this wastewater bucket down below. I'm going to allow this net to drain a little bit more of this water out, and then we can go feed it to the fish. Again, because I have an auto water change system, I'm not too concerned with rinsing my brine shrimp. A lot of people rinse their brine shrimp to get the additional salt and maybe with some of the extra nutrients that might be in the water out of it, so that all you're left with is just the pure baby brine shrimp. Other folks will take those brine shrimp and put them in the refrigerator for a little while so that they all drop down to the bottom of your container, and then you can further collect them and separate out the water. But for me, I just dump that into a little Tupperware here. We go get some aquarium water, and we're gonna feed these to the fish. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned how to build this 5-gallon DIY baby brine shrimp hatchery. It's certainly not the smallest, it's certainly not the biggest out there, but it does the job, and it's a nice size, a nice manageable size, and it gets a really good hatch rate so that I can feed my entire room full of fish every single day with live baby brine shrimp. So that's a look at the build. That's a look at how we fill it up, how we feed it, and all the parts and components that go into it. If you want any of the pieces that went into this build, specifically the harder to find components, the links for those will be in the description down below. Those are affiliate links. If you click on those and buy any of the parts, it helps out the channel a little bit, so definitely appreciate it. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later.